Already, this is our first webinar we're doing, and I thank you for joining us and being patient with us and hopefully understanding, but feel free to give any candid feedback. We are always looking to improve programs. My name is Karen Byrne. I run the aquatic education program for the New Jersey Division of Fish and Wildlife, and I'm hoping this is going to be the first of several webinars we'll be able to offer. If you'll see on the right-hand side, there's a chat box and questions. Feel free to ask any questions that you have for Keith. I'll be moderating that and answering them either through him, or if I know the answer, I'll respond, and we'll try to get them answered in a timely manner. If not, we'll wait until the end. You are muted. You can raise your hand. I'll be keeping track of all of that. And also at the end of this, a survey will pop up with 4 short questions. If you have time, I'd appreciate it if you would answer them. The final question is other topics you're interested in. We'd love to know what you're interested in learning about so we can meet that need. If for some reason you need to get off and go buy a ton of ice fishing equipment because you're super stoked to go ice fishing, there will be an email with the link to the survey. So I'd like to introduce Keith Griglock. He is our hunter education coordinator for the Northern region, and Keith is a true outdoorsman, and he can be found outside doing anything and everything, and often finds his family in tow. So he seemed like the best person to present about ice fishing and how to make it a family fun day. So Keith, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you so very much, Karen. I probably put more work into this than any other program I've ever done with the division here. I've been working as a hunter ed coordinator for 20 years, and as a hunter education coordinator, it's made me a much better ice fisherman, because that's a time of year that I have not a ton of lot going in at the office, so it gives me a chance to get out on the ice and have a good time enjoying what we have here in New Jersey. We got awesome 4 seasons fisheries that a lot of people take off the winter time, and they really don't need to do that because we have some really good opportunities out there. So we're going to talk about ice fishing, and my presentation, hang on, I lost my presentation.
Do you want me to share it?
Yeah, 1, 2 view where I just see myself now.
Stop sharing screen.
Oh, hang on, there we go. Can people see my screen now?
Yep, and just put it in, yep, view from beginning. Perfect.
All righty, so here we are, talk about ice fishing. One big limiting factor when it comes to ice fishing is there safe ice? Now, this year has been a very unique year. Last year was the worst year I've ever seen. We only had ice for about 18 hours here in Warren County. I got out twice in that 18 hours. This year was a little bit different. We had that big snowstorm back in December, and that cooled a lot of lakes off. It actually created a lot of slush ice, and then that locked up. And there was a lot of guys that were getting out on decent ice in December. Then, if you remember, Christmas Eve, I believe it was, we had like 2.5 inches of rain, and we lost almost all the ice, but there was some ponds that still hung on to that ice. So then when it got cold again in January, you had a lot of ponds that started building ice again. We're having decent ice in some locations, but down the road, 2-3 miles away, there'd be open water. It's been a very weird year. The places that do have safe ice, the ice hasn't been very uniform. So when we look at ice safety, how much ice we need, I like to see we need at least 4 inches thick, okay? There's a lot of variability when it comes to ice, ambient temperature. Is it clear ice? Is it black ice? Is it white ice? All these different things play into how safe that ice is going to be. If you're out there just stepping on the ice and the ice is bending and you got water coming up, the next step from bending is going swimming, okay? That is not safe at all. If you start going down the ice, I always like to have a spud bar with me, and I tap the ice and it cracks in every direction. That also means time to get off. When we look at different types of ice, early season, first ice you see, it's clear. They usually call that black ice. So why do you think that's clear? Well, it's clear because there's no air bubbles in it. So that's why it's that much stronger than when you have white ice. White ice is generally when you have snow that melts and then refreezes. So you get that white color to it, and that's all the air bubbles in there, not nearly as strong as the clear black ice. So 4 inches of that black ice is fine. White ice, I'd probably go a little bit longer. Wait till it's 5 or 6 inches before I think it's safe. Now you see the cracks in the ice. People sometimes get weird. Why does it have all those cracks? Well, when ice expands, when water is freezing, it expands. It has to, go somewhere, and it ends up making cracks throughout the ice. So if you're out there on a really cold day, 15 degrees, you actually hear it just echoing as it goes down the lake as the cracks are being formed. It's actually an awesome sound to hear. If you hear that, you know the ice is only growing and getting better. As you look at the picture on the right there, you can see we got a lot of water on the ice. That's late season. And once we start getting water pulled up on the ice, that means you're not going to have too much longer safe ice unless you get some real cold weather to refreeze that up. Now, different things that can affect ice thickness. Most of our lakes in New Jersey have some sort of spring, either in the lake or have some sort of creek inflows. So there's some areas, some lakes, portions of the lake will never freeze because you got natural springs there. A lot of our lakes that have docks, they'll have bubblers around them. The bubblers are designed to keep it aerated so it doesn't freeze around there. But on a real cold night, you might get some skim ice over that. You get some snow on top of that, and you don't realize that the ice can go from 6 inches to 1 inch in one step. So you want to be very, very careful in areas that you haven't been to before, or other people aren't around on the ice. Also got to think sometimes if the roads are really tight to the waterway, is there salt runoff? Sometimes there's a little bridge that goes over a portion of the lake. Usually it's more open underneath that because of some of that salt runoff. And also you get the ambient temperature of the shoreline. That, if it turns warm, the shoreline actually warms up quicker than the ice. And you can see here on the pictures on the right where it's opening up a little bit. You got wet on the, you can see right here, that's all wet. This is 12 inches of ice here, but you just got a little water that you just got to step over to get onto the ice there. This year, it's been like a weird year. I was saying the picture here on the left, that is all pretty much ice cubes that refroze together. I tried stepping out, and it'd be 3 inches one spot. I hit the spud bar here, go right through. Here it's 6 inches, here it's 2 inches. It's open water out here. We had some rain. It actually washed all this out. I would never, ever think about going out here. But on the far side here, that was 7 inches solid ice, and tons of guys were fishing that. You just had no way to get it from here. Now, the exact same day, about 5 miles away, I was on this pond that had these big sheets of ice that blew to the shoreline and then refroze. And we took our time, hit the spud bar here. It was about 6 inches, checked the crack. We kept working our way out. And it was 6 inches all the way across. It was plenty safe. Meanwhile, a lake 5 miles away, there was no way that you could get anywhere near safe ice, or it wasn't even safe out there at the same time on that day. So talk about snow. Snow can be your friend, it can be your foe. A little bit of snow on ice that's thick isn't a bad thing. If you got 10 inches of ice, a little snow on top, one, it makes it easier to walk on. It also protects the ice from melting. It acts almost like a cooler on top. So if you do have a warm day where you might get a little rain, it absorbs some of that water, and then it can refreeze. Now, the bigger issue this year is how much snow we got over the last weekend there. Snow on the ice, one, it's going to insulate the ice and it's going to make it much slower growing. But I've never seen this much snow and ice that was this thin. 4 or 6 inches is okay to be out there, but now you got 36 inches of snow in some places. Mount Arlington had the highest amount in the state, which I believe was 35.5 inches. And Mount Arlington is where Lake Apacon is, one of the biggest ice fishing lakes in the state. So it can make for very, very sloppy conditions. What happens is I did some calculations here. If I took 30 inches of snow with a 10-to-1 snow ratio, it's 3 inches of water. Bottom line is 3 inches of water on there is going to equal 15.59 pounds of water added weight per square foot on the surface. That means if you have a 1 acre pond, that's 339 tons of extra weight on top of that 1 acre portion. So what's that mean? That weight is pushing down, and then when you drill a hole, the water comes rising up almost like a geyser. It's not going to come flying up, but you're going to, after a couple minutes sitting there, you're going to see the water. You're going to be sitting in a puddle that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger until all around you turns gray. Now, some guys I know that have been attempting to get out the last few days, they said that there was a foot of slush on top of the real ice. Now, if there's water on top of the ice, the reason why it's water, it's not cold enough to turn the ice. So now it's melting on the top end. So places that had 7 inches of ice back on Sunday are now only having 3 or 4 inches with lots of slush on top. So I would say definitely a no-go for several more days. Hopefully this pans out. Some of the best things, what happened there? Yeah, so you look at our snow cover that we have right now, this dark blue, that's everything that's over 2 foot of snow. That's every place that had pretty much safe ice. But the good news is that we have this big polar vortex that's supposed to be coming in. Sometime next week, we're gonna get super, super cold weather. Now, I looked at Mount Arlington, that's Lake Apacon, compared to Central Jersey, down around Trenton. You look down here, Trenton's still only going to be highs of the mid 20s to low 20s next week. So lakes that actually don't have any ice right now potentially could freeze up and might actually be safe by next weekend. The only thing we really have to watch is that storm that's coming in Sunday. If it drops a lot of snow, some areas in Central Jersey I hear are supposed to get 6 inches or more. That could screw up ice development down there also. So right now, it was warm today. I'm actually hoping that most of that slush melts down. So when we hit this cold, cold weather next week, it refreezes. So as for this weekend, I'd say it's time just to get your stuff together and keep our fingers crossed, because hopefully next weekend it will be safe. We always want to be safe. Anytime I'm on the ice, want to make sure have these polar picks, little ice spikes. If you want, make them yourself. 2 Phillips head screwdrivers could work. I like to have these. I wear them around my neck. If I was to fall in, pull these apart and I could claw myself across the ice to get back out. The spud bar is something I was also talking about. You can actually use a spud bar to get through the ice, but this time of year, I like to every step hit the ice with it, every step. And if it starts cracking in every direction, it's time to go back the way you came. If for some reason the ice isn't looking safe cracking, you always go back the direction you came. If it was safe going out to where you had issues, it should be safe going back. When the ice is really slick early season before snow gets on it, having those ice creepers work great. But with a group of people, having a throw rope is also a good thing in case somebody gets in trouble. So if you did fall through, I've getting on and off ice, I've had my feet punched through in knee-deep water. Where it wasn't an issue. I've never actually fallen through ice in any depth, and that's mostly because I try to stay off any ice that doesn't look safe. If you do happen to fall through, you're going to need to take a few seconds just to catch your breath. You're going to get hit and shocked by that cold air, that cold water. Take that few seconds, a couple deep breaths, and now you're going to kick really hard as you can to get back up on the ice. This is when it's important to have these polar picks where now I could dig into the ice as I pull myself up. Now, the more distributed your weight is across the ice, the safer the less likely you're going to fall back through. So it's good to lay on your side, roll over, keep rolling until you get back to thicker ice, the direction you came in, walk back, get to the car, and it's probably a good chance that you probably don't want to fish the rest of the day. Go home, warm up, get dry before we think about going out again. And it might not be the best idea to go back out again if the lake you were just on, you just fell through. So how do I get through the ice? One of the things I keep mentioning is that spud bar. This time of year, I use it for safety reasons as I'm walking across the ice, but you can also use that for making your holes. As a kid, that's all we used to have. If it's 5, 6 inches or less, it works very, very well. This time of year, I was actually using that most of the time, not even carrying the auger with me because we didn't have that much ice. You can even just get one of those spud bars, not an official spud bar, but like Harbor Freight or Tractor Supply, sell them as a breaker bar, 5 foot long, they weigh about 18 pounds, and they're only like $20. So you don't need a ton of money to get into ice fishing there. You can get hand augers, gas augers, electric augers. The more ice you're trying to move, the bigger diameter of hole, the harder it's going to be to get through. So 8-inch hole would be harder to get through with a hand auger than a 6-inch hole. A lot of people the last probably 4 or 5 years, these drill attachments have really taken off. You pretty much want like an 18-volt drill or bigger to be able to move the ice. you'd still want to stick probably with the smaller hole. 18 volt with an 8-inch diameter hole isn't going to cut very easily at all. Some of the brands, one of them even makes a 4.5-inch diameter hole. That's depending on what you're fishing for. It might be on the small side, but that's going to be much, much easier to drill through than if you had a much bigger diameter hole. Now, after you make the hole, you want to be able to get the ice out. Get an ice skimmer here. It's almost like a strainer, like a ladle. You can stick it in the hole and you pull the ice out just so you have a nice clear hole to fish. So finding lakes, which ones freeze first? I was explaining about how unique this year was. Generally further north is going to be obviously colder. Smaller lakes are going to freeze up much quicker. It doesn't take as long for the water to turn over and get cooled down as opposed to a much bigger lake. Shallower lakes are going to turn cooler much quicker, so they're a good chance they're going to freeze up a little quicker. And you got to think about the wind. Some places you get a little skim ice started, it's just going to keep building nonstop. This year when we had that real good cold snap a couple weeks ago, the wind was howling, and big lakes like Greenwood Lake is usually a really hot ice fishing spot. Guys are fishing it in boats because it never froze up with that much wind. So trying to find out where these places are, social media is actually a pretty good way to figure out. It's interesting. The ice fishing community seems to be a bit more free with information than I see in a lot of other fishing communities. A lot of other Facebook pages I'm on, saltwater and freshwater, you see everyone blacks out all the background, so you got no clue where you are. Ice fishing, virtually never see people blacking out the backgrounds, and people will be very free with maybe not the exact pond they're fishing, but they'll tell you what county and how much ice there is, because most are, are all brothers out there. We want to looking out for each other. Want to see everyone safe, and don't want to see someone drive 2 hours to get to a lake to find out that it's only got an inch of ice or that's even open water. So there are a couple different Facebook pages out there that really are, just right around ice fishing that can help you out tremendously. Narrowing down locations, you found that lake you think you're going to go to, you find out there's safe ice. Now, where the heck do I want to start drilling? Depends upon what you're fishing for. If you're in a small pond, it's easy. All the fish are probably going to go to the deepest spot of the pond. So if it's a 1-acre pond, 2-acre pond, it's pretty much you got one choice, deepest water, and you're good to go. When you're looking at bigger lakes, it becomes to what are you trying to fish for? Looking for drop-offs and ledges, weed beds, looking for holes in the weed beds, looking for various structure. If I was fishing for panfish, some of the back end of these bays where it's just a big flat that's 8 or 10 foot, that's where I'm going to be finding a lot of my perch and bluegill, things like that. If I want to find walleye, I'm probably not going to be fishing that shallow bay. You're going to look for the deeper drop-offs here where it's a little bit more steep. So how does the barometer affect the bite? It's interesting. Fish don't need to feed every day. They're cold-blooded species. When it gets cold, they don't have to feed. A little different than mammals where I still have to feed a little bit every day. But this makes it, some days are much better than others. So interesting, you're hooking up, you have an awesome day. I guarantee that was because the barometer was moving, and more like it was moving down, was falling. So barometer is affected by different weather systems. Interesting, just trying to explain so people understand. As you see big weather systems moving across, you usually see in general national maps, they show where the low pressure is, the high pressure is, and all these little circle lines. Try to envision that as like a topo map. Here we are looking at a topo map. The L is the big hole, the H is top of the mountain. And when the fish are sitting here and the low is moving towards them, it's pretty much they're falling off that cliff. They want to feed. So when it's falling, they're going to be feeding. You got that big low coming at you, it's going to be an awesome bite. Sunday was the best day we had this year. I talked to a lot of guys that did really, really good Sunday, just in front of that snowstorm. Even while it was snowing that evening, it was just lights out. But sometimes that storm might brush to the south, or if I'm further up here, as that low comes across, I'm not getting hit by the storm, but the isobars, the pressure's still dropping. Anytime that dips, the fish are going to be hitting there. Now, when you're coming back up that hill, as that low moves off, the pressure starts going back up. That is when the fish aren't going to be hitting. It's sometimes you think you're fishing a sterile lake on certain days. So you can really narrow down the best times to be out on the ice by looking at what the barometer is doing. Now, a lot of your weather pages you look at, they just show you little arrows are going up or going down. you can find places. Rutgers Weather. Rutgers has weather stations all across the state, and they give you a lot of information. It's real-time information. This one I'm looking at here is actually from the Pequest Trout Hatchery. And the nice thing is here we got temperature, dew point, wind gust, normal wind, and then here's the barometer. And all the x-axes line up at the same rate there. So this day, it was, believe it or not, it was pretty much sunny all day long. Temperature was relatively stable. Wind wasn't moving that much, but look how much that pressure was going up and down. Even though just looking out the window, it looked pretty much the same that day. So this is how you got to plan your life. Looking at what the pressure's doing. I have this app now. I will say that this Rutgers weather stuff is not the most mobile friendly. Having a laptop makes it much better, but the mobile, you can still get enough to be able to see what this barometer is doing. So I wake up in the morning, it's like, it's going up. Okay, that's good. I'll go to work. Then all of a sudden it's lunchtime. It's like, it's starting to drop. Okay, let's run to the pond. Bam, bang, a limit of bluegills. And it's like, all right, slow it up. Let's get back to work again. Back to work. And it's 4:30, 5 o'clock. It's jumping. Jump in the car, hit the lake again, catch a half a dozen bass. And it's like, okay, it's climbing. I got some adult responsibilities to do. I'll take care of the kids, cook dinner, do everything. And then all of a sudden, whoa, hang on. We're falling off the cliff. Hang on. You got to blow off all responsibilities right here. Any responsibility you have, when you see it dropping like that, that's when you got to get on the ice. And you know what? When the pressure turns around, that's the time to beg for forgiveness right there. Words to live by. So we talk about how the pressure affects things. Angle of sun also does. Even on a day when the fishing isn't that great, when the fishing's downright bad, okay, you're still going to be able to catch a few right when that sun gets down to the horizon. Usually once the shadows get real long and that sun dips below the horizon, you usually got at least 15, 20 minutes of a good bite. Even on a bad day, you'll still be able to hopefully pull a half a dozen fish out. On a good day, you might be able to pull 20 fish out in that last half hour. Talk about the evening. Need sun. There is, you can ice fish at night. This year, I definitely would not do it with how sketchy ice conditions are. But on years when you have a lot of ice, you definitely want to go to the lake where you've been to during the day so you know where the safe places to get on and off are. But there is good crappie fishing that I've caught everything at night, but crappie fishing up in New England, a lot of guys, they don't even hit the lakes till after dark. I started finding out about this fishery when I started having kids, and I put them to bed at 8 o'clock at night. I hit the lake at 9 and fished till midnight and had a great old time. So jigging for panfish is by far my favorite type fishing when it comes to ice fishing. I just like to be able to catch lots of fish. I don't have patience. I like to move around and like to see the smiles on my kids there. So sunfish, perch, crappie, those are my main targets right there. So general state regulations, you're looking at panfish, your sunfish and perch combined. Creel limit is 25. No size limits when it comes to that. Crappie is a separate limit where it's 10 fish at 8 inches. So you can actually keep 35 total if you keep your limit of the sunfish and perch combined along with the 10 crappie. That's the general state regs. There are some other waters that might have special regs, so make sure you check out the Fish and Wildlife Digest. So equipment could be as expensive or as cheap as you want to make it. Even the expensive ice fishing stuff isn't that expensive. I did a program with the Outdoor Women League, and we just used the top half of fishing rods and tied the monofilament to that because we were only fishing in 5 foot of water, so a reel wasn't even that important. Most of your jigging rods, like this one over here, are going to be anywhere from $20 to $50. I usually just take the reel I have on my trout rod from the springtime, put it on the ice rod, I'm good to go. Here's more dedicated kind of single action reels. And you see a lot of older, back in the day, they didn't even use reels. They just put the, line wrapped around the 2 pegs there. Because as you're pan fishing, you're generally not hooking a big fish that's going to spool you. The drag system is not very important at all when you're targeting just specifically the panfish. And when it comes to what type line to use, braid, Berkeley, they make this micro ice crystal fire line. When I'm fishing open water, I fish exclusively braid, but for ice fishing, I still prefer to stick to the fluoro or mono. The 4-pound braid I had worked great until it gets a little nick in it from the ice or whatever. Next thing you know, the strength of that goes to nothing until a 3 and sunny breaks your line. If you are fishing the braid, maybe go a little bit higher. But for jigging purposes, I stick just with the fluoro or the monofilament. And while I'm fishing for panfish, generally 4-pound test is my go-to pound test when it comes to jigging. So if you don't buy anything else extra when it comes to ice fishing stuff for jigging, the spring tips are sometimes called spring bobs. This is, I find, the single most important thing to have in my arsenal when it comes to fishing for panfish. What it is this a little tiny, really, really sensitive spring right here at the end of the rod. And then when the fish hits, it actually moves with, the fish can't even feel it. It's so limber right there. So in a pinch, you could open up a big pen and take the spring from inside and tape that to the end of the rod. You could spend maybe $5 or $6 on a more expensive one. You got to watch out. Some of them where the line goes through the center of them on a cold day that freezes up. So I like to have where it doesn't have to go through any narrow portions where it might freeze up. I usually take mine, and I used to, if I build rods, do some rod wraps and actually tie that in permanently. Or if I don't have time for that, I'll just take some electrical tape and tape that in, just so it's always there. But it's I think that's, of everything that you can have, that's probably the most crucial thing that can make you a hero, and it only costs a couple dollars. So you don't want to believe anything you read online. Here, I checked out basics for ice fishing. It's something about ice flies. That looks like, I don't know, a parachute Adams or something. I've never seen a pickerel take a dry fly while while ice fishing. Same thing, I wouldn't think of using a 1/2-ounce bass jig like that. I'm going to stick with stuff I know that's going to work. I'm scaling it down. The fish are going to be more finicky, so you're going to go a little bit smaller than what you would ever think about fishing open water. When it comes to jigging sunfish, the jigs here on the left I like to use, vertical or horizontal ones. If I'm fishing with a fish finder, my sonar, these horizontal ones are going to be a little bit more friendly to the sonar. It'll be able to read the marks a little bit better. Guys that are jigging exclusively looking for perch, these little jigging wraps or these jigging spoons, these are Swedish pimples. You can get these, the small size is only 3/4 inch long. So you can get them when the sunnies will still hit them. But it's a matter of, are you trying to target more perch or more sunfish? Now, when I talk small, we're talking small. When the fish are not very aggressive on that high pressure days, when they really don't want to feed, you really got to finesse them to hitting. You get tiny, tiny, tiny. Look at this jig here. They're actually sold out 1/72nd of an ounce. 72 of those jigs equal 1 ounce sinker. That's a lot. It's small, man. It's small. But on days when it gets really, really tough fishing, you might have to go super, super small. That might only be a size 16 hook there. Then you want to figure out, you're going to have some sort of bait on there. If the fish are super aggressive, you can get away without bait. But generally, like I said, these fish don't need to feed every day. During the wintertime, having something to sweeten the hook is going to be something you're definitely going to want to have. These are pretty much maggots, except we call them fancy names. We call them spikes, okay? If you want to collect your own, pick up a roadkill deer in October when it's about 70 degrees and you can shovel them out and load them in sawdust for the year. You can get fancy spikes called mousies that have tails on them. I used to fish them all the time when I was a kid because these things were cheap. They're only about 2 cents a piece. Well, now demand for mousies, I'm not sure how the economics work behind it, but now they're almost as expensive as waxworms. I find the waxworms actually work even better. Early season, when we get that first ice, sometimes the sport shops might not have the bait in yet. You can get these from a pet shop, not like PetSmart, but a smaller local pet shop usually has waxworms on hand. Now, 10 years ago, I would say I wouldn't have tried any synthetics, but now there are some good companies that build actually pretty good products. Gulp is probably one of the most well-known ones. They have one that's called a fish fry that's shaped just like a mousie. Why it's called a fish fry, I don't know, but I always carry a jar with that in my back, in my arsenal, just in case I can't get bait, or if the bait gets frozen, it dies and isn't too good. So that's why I recommend getting one of these bait pucks. It's insulated there a little bit, so if it's really cold out, it's not going to freeze while it's on the ice. If you leave it in the car overnight, you got a little fighting chance that you're going to be okay with your waxies or your mousies. And I'm sure anyone that's ever trout fished with mealworms know what it's like to have a pocket full of mealworms when that cap pops off the container. This bait puck really protects you against that. If I was going to be targeting perch, or crappie, I might try some fathead minnows too. I've had some good luck crappie after dark or right at last light, fishing little fatheads just right underneath the ice. So looking at different jigging techniques, you want to find the depth of the water. If you don't have a sonar, you might have to put a little split shot on your, a little bit above the jig, or fish a heavier jig to find out where the bottom is, because most of the fish are going to be probably within a foot of the bottom. So you want to start down low. Now, everyone has their own different techniques. I'm just telling you the way I do it and the way what I find works best for me. When I first show up to the hole, I'm gonna, what I call aggressively jig. Now, this isn't like you're jigging bluefish, yanking as hard fast as you can, but I'm gonna drop to the bottom till I see the line go slack, or I look under, on my machine and see that I'm on the bottom. Then I'm going to just slowly pop it up, pop it up, pop it up till about 3 foot off the bottom, give it a fast drop, and I'll do that maybe 3 times from the bottom up to 3 foot and drop. And what that does, if there's any fish in the area, it kind of flags them in a little bit. Then at that point, now I'll just try finesse. I'll just maybe lift it up about 10 inches and drop it back down. Lift it up about 10 inches, drop it back down. Then I'm just gonna hold in one spot. On days when the fish are really, really finicky, I won't even hold the rod. I'll put the rod here in a rod holder, just lay it on the bucket just like that. And all I'm doing is just watching the tip here, my spring tip, and just watching it flex. Once it flexes, just set the hook and you got them. Sometimes I'll even just hold the rod like that. I'll just tap the rod just like that. Lift it up, lay it back down bucket, give a little more taps. Just that little vibration can turn that fish that was just sniffing into biting there. Now, as I explained, that spring tip is, you got to go buy one. Now you found the depth. You found a hot spot. The fish, more fish are probably going to be at the exact same depth. So my goal is not to touch that reel. Okay, people, sometimes you get, in the habit, you're out freshwater fishing, you set the hook, you start reeling. Well, I like to get in the habit of, if I'm in water over 5 foot deep, with my opposite hand, this is my son, he's backwards, he's fighting lefty. So he holds the line with the right hand. As he lifts with the left hand, pulls with the right hand, almost like as if you're stripping in fly rod. You can, with probably 10 foot, 11 foot of water, you can do that technique and flip the fish onto the ice. And now, since we have that exact depth that we were fishing at, where that fish hit, we can drop back down and get down as quickly as possible back to where we know the fish are. Now, fishing without electronics versus fishing with electronics. If you're in under 5 foot of water, you don't even need electronics. The water's clear enough. You can actually look down the hole and see your jig, see your fish. If it's totally blacked out, you can, like my son here, is on his knees staring down the hole so he could actually see the fish. If you have one of those shelters that you can pop up on the ice, that makes it dark around the, around the outside. So when you look down, you can actually see your jig much easier. A lot of times you don't even see the fish come up to the jig, but you can still see the jig. And we watch that little spring tip just tap a little bit. When you look down the hole, you'll see the jig all of a sudden disappear. You lift up and you got the fish on. But the guys I started fishing with 10 years ago, is one of my bosses picked up one of these Vexilar flashers, and after I saw him out fishing me every single time, I said, I need to get me one of these. It's pretty much 1970s technology with a $350 price tag on it. But if you get into ice fishing, it's something that you get really habituated to and you become an addict and you can't fish without. The issue I have with them is I take people out all the time and then they want to use my fish finder. I was put a question out on one of our Facebook pages asking what type of flashers are people using. It seemed like everyone had their own one they liked the best, but some of them were actually ones that guys had converted from their open water fish finders for ice fish. And I said, hang on, I got one of them in my basement that I use on my kayak. It was a Humminbird that has all different types of setting. It had a flasher setting, and it has some other settings that were just as sensitive as the Vexilar. I could drop that single waxy, that single spike, that single maggot. I could drop it down the hole, and I can actually see it on the screen. So if I had the Vexilar or had that flasher style unit, you can see this red line here, that hard line, that's the bottom. So reading the outside there, that's 11 feet. There's always some surface noise up top, don't worry about that. This little green line, that's my lure. That's my little wax worm floating down. And now all of a sudden you see this red line, that's the fish. Now, if this is falling and the fish is coming up to it, that's a day that the pressure is probably falling, because that means the bite's on. So you watch it go down. Next thing you know, as soon as you see that fish on the screen, you gotta get in the habit. Stop staring at the screen and now look at your little spring tip. So when the spring tip goes, you set the hook. So that's how the flasher works. Now, this fish finder here has a flasher mode, but I've been messing around with the other modes, and this is one that you'd be using more open water, but it works just as well for ice fishing. So the screen here sliding from right to left, and as we see the jig go down, that jig is dropping. Here's the jig dropping, and all of a sudden, this is the red line, that's the bottom. All of a sudden out of nowhere, bam, a fish appears on the screen. I end up dropping below him accidentally. He kind of comes down. I lift up a little bit. He kind of follows. Then he disappears again. So here I am on the next screen. I'm dropping down. And you see, this is the bottom here, but that red line, that's actually the fish. So I drop it on his head. I lift up. I drop it back on him. And you see the fish is just sitting there. I lift the jig just a couple inches. Bam, he hits it. I set the hook. And I miss. You can see that line. That's where I missed. So here's the fish down there. He's still laughing at me. But I can drop back down and see the fish again. Now, as I was saying, this one of the reasons why I like fishing these electronics so much is that it really shows you what's going on. It tells you are the fish down there and not hitting, or are there just no fish around at all. Sometimes if they're down there and they're not hitting, you could just start fishing smaller stuff until you can find them and get them to hit. Something I usually do, I carry multiple rods with me on the ice. I don't want to be sitting there when it's below freezing, trying to sit there threading the eye and tying the new hook on, trying a new jig on. I'll just pick a different rod up that has a different size jig at that point. So with electronics, man, help a brother out. Drill 2 holes side by side. Those are actually brothers, my oldest and youngest son. You see we got 2 holes here, one here, one here. If you drill them close enough, you can actually pick up both jigs on the same sonar. Sometimes it gets a little confusing trying to figure out whose fish is hitting what. I usually set them a little bit further apart. All of a sudden, my little guy there, he hooks a fish. We'll take the sonar, drop it in the next hole, and we're pretty much sharing. It's going back and forth from one hole to the next. So you can actually fish with 2 people off the same sonar. So when I'm drilling my holes, I always drill 2 side by side for all my jigging holes, just so we can share the sonar as we go along. So drill lots of holes and you cover lots of ground. Believe it or not, this tournament out in Brainerd, Minnesota pulls in 20,000 people. It's amazing. I don't drill that many holes, but I still, if I got a gas auger and have the ability to drill more holes than I need, I like to cover lots of ground. I'll drill more holes than I need. And when I say create a paper route for sunset, what I'll do is I'll punch out 15 holes. I'll fish all of them, and some of the holes are going to be better than other holes. And I'll keep a note, okay, that one I caught 5 fish in, that one I only caught 2 fish in. Remember I said you got that magic hour, that last half hour when the bite goes hopefully crazy. Those couple holes that I knew were better than the other ones, those are the ones I'm going to come back to for that last half hour, because I know I'm going to do much better in those holes than some of the other ones that weren't as hot. Right. Some days it all comes together. Some days you crush them, and other days you just walk off empty-handed, but it's still better than sitting at home. We're going to work. All right, so everything I talked about so far was jigging. Now, the other big popular type of ice fishing is using tip-ups. These tip-ups are set, you walk away from them, and when the fish hits, the flag goes up and you run over to grab the fish. Now, when it comes to ice fishing, you can have 5 fishing devices total. So that's 5 tip-ups. If you got 5 tip-ups, you can't jig. If you're jigging with 1 rod, then you can put 4 tip-ups in. The tip-ups need to have your name and address on them. So we know, is it one guy fishing with 10 tip-ups, or is it 2 where he's got a guy hiding somewhere? We just want to make sure everyone's following the rules, so you got to have your name and address on each one of those tip-ups. So usually the tip-ups, guys are targeting bigger predatory fish. The 2 biggest things that guys are catching in most of our lakes are going to be bass and pickerel, and you also catch a lot of perch on the tip-ups too, depending on how you have them rigged up. So bass, 5 fish at 12 inches is statewide regs. Pickerel's 5 fish at 15 inches. So the way the tip-up is set up, it has, there's a flag there that's on a spring, and you look on the left here, here's the spool. I use Dacron on there. Instead of mono, the Dacron isn't going to get tangled up when you're pulling it up by hand on the ice, and it's thicker diameter, so it's not going to cut your hands as like a braid might if the fish goes for a run. Now, this spool here is attached to actually just a rod that goes all the way through the whole tip up, and then you see you got this T portion up here. This thing spins at the same time the spool here spins. So the flag here is set underneath that T, and then when the fish moves it, it rotates 90 degrees, the flag goes up. Then you see the flag goes up, that's when you're going to run over to try to grab and see what's going on. So trying to find the depth, if you don't have a fish finder, they make these special clip-on weights. Clip it on the hook, drop it to the bottom, and then I like to fish about a foot off the bottom or so. But you got to remember that we're measuring from the bottom of the spool, so that spool is 10 inches below the ice. So take that into account when you're trying to adjust the height of where that bait is going to be. If you're fishing shallower lakes, 5-6 feet, you probably don't even need one of these. You can just look down the hole and see the weed tops and just set it a little bit above the weed tops there. Old school technique I know a lot of guys used to use is they actually just slide a button on the Dacron line, and then when they have it set after the fish runs off 20 feet, when they go to reset the tip up, they just bring it right back to where that button on the line was, and they don't have to go back to dropping it with the weight to try to find out where the exact spot is that they were. So basic multi-species rig, if I'm going out just in the lake where I'm not targeting any big toothy critters, like I'm not targeting pike or I'm not targeting muskie, I would just use a braided Dacron 20 to 30 pound test. Then from there it goes to, I have an egg sinker here, usually 1/4 ounce or 1/2 ounce. I go then to a barrel swivel, and then right here is where my leader is. I'll generally use about 2 foot, maybe 3 foot of either mono or fluoro. 10, 12 pound test is pretty much what I use. Open water, I usually use 4 or 6 pound test, but because when you're ice fishing, you don't really have a drag system and you got little sharper edges around the ice, you're gonna have to go a little bit heavier. Now, you're gonna be using the single hooks. Generally, I use size 6, maybe up to a size 2. You can only have a single hook. It could be a treble hook, but you can only have a single hook when it comes to your tip ups. You can't have 2 hooks on the same minnow. So when it comes to bait, talking about minnows, medium shiners is probably the go-to for most guys that are going to be out there targeting either the bass, the pickerel, or perch. If you're targeting just specifically perch, you might want to get fat heads that are a little bit smaller. And then for that, I'd probably be using a size 8 or a size 6 hook. So covering ground with tip ups, everyone has their own method, their own technique. What I like to do is depending upon where I'm fishing. If I'm going to be where I know there's a drop off, I'm going to try to set a string of tip ups out so I got all different depths along that drop off. Or I might zigzag up and down that drop off, just so I know I'm covering all different depths. If it's a big flat I'm fishing, I might just punch them out in the grid where I'll just go 5 by 5. So I got 25 holes like in a square. And when I set the tip ups, I'll set one in one hole, then I'll skip 1 or 2 holes and put the next one in. So my flags are now distributed with extra holes around them. So if I do have a spot that seems to be hot where I'm getting more flags in another spot, I already got holes that I can now move my tip ups from one to the next hole to keep it, to try to keep up with the fish. A lot of times the perch are moving in schools and they just like to be in one area. To be able to have extra opportunities without having to drill more holes can make you a bit more efficient while you're out there. Also talking about reusing holes. You go out, especially later, see there's holes all over the place. When it comes to ice fishing etiquette, it's not like somebody owns those holes. If there's nobody else around, feel free to take a spud bar, punch that hole out, and continue fishing there. If you got an auger, definitely drill a new hole. Trying to drill out an old hole is going to cause damage to probably you and possibly the auger too. Drill a new hole right next to that one there. All right, also when we talk about where we're going to set up camp, that means where I'm going to be sitting most of the time. Have your back to the wind. So now with my back to the wind, all the tip ups are in front of me where I can see them. So I don't have to keep looking over my shoulder in order to see if there's any flags coming up. Usually what I'll do is I'll drill a couple extra holes where I'll be jigging and I'll have view of all my tip ups in front of me. So all of a sudden you see a flag go up. It's, you got to yell flag. It isn't ice fishing, you don't yell flag. And then this is where you do all the work and then your kids reap all the benefits because they're usually quicker and can get to the flag before you. If they have ice skates, there's no chance you're ever going to get to that flag, okay? Now, there's all different styles of tip-ups. The ones I'm showing here are polar style, or that's what people generally call them. That's the original brand. But it has that T top. Remember I was pointing at that actually spins from a distance. While I'm walking up, I could see that thing spinning. And if it's spinning really quick, I want to run even quicker over there. You might see it stop. You might not see it move at all. So when I get to the hole, I want to look down the hole and observe what's going on with that line. Is that line just still straight down? I can see my shiner, or maybe the wind blew it. If it's off to the side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get to if the line is this direction, I'm going to get to the other side here, and I'm going to start feeling with my hands. I'm going to hold the line with my hand. I'm slowly going to move it and feel if I feel any resistance. If I feel a resistance, I'll just hold this a little bit longer and see what the fish wants to do. A lot of times they'll go for a second run, and that's when you set the hook. When you set the hook, it's just a quick snap of the wrist to set the hook, and now it's just going to be hand over hand bringing it in. Now I will say that this is not the best ice fishing form here. You do much better to be directly over the hole as we're pulling up, and you want to try, if the fish is running in this direction, you want to try to get on the other side of the hole so you're not having as much leverage on the edge of the ice. You want to try to be lifting it up, the fish straight up. You remember now, your hands are the drag system, so if you hook into a big pickerel, he wants to run, you're going to have to try to let the line go and try to not to get the line tangled up. It's a lot different than, when you're open water where your rod acts as a bit of the drag system. Now it's just your hands. So you get the fish up to the hole. Smaller fish, you can just flip right up onto the ice, a little perch or something like that. A bigger fish and bigger bass, you might have to your lip or you palm them and flip them up into the ice. Get some quick victory pictures there, and then we could put them back down the hole to fight another day. Now there is an alternative solution to this where we just release them right into the frying pan. Fish through the ice it's so much better through the ice than it is any other time of year. The meat is usually whiter, it's usually firmer. Most people aren't going to think about keeping sunfish in the summer, but ice fishing, guys do it. Perch, it's like the most sought after thing is perch through the ice, perch and crappie. So definitely take advantage, but don't take, just because you can take 25 doesn't mean you have to take 25. I'm fortunate where I live, I got ice fishing around the corner. I never keep more than what I'm going to eat that night. And it just gives me an excuse to get back out the next night to catch another dinner. Now, everything I've been talking about has been what probably the majority of people in New Jersey fish for, is the bass and pickerel and perch on the tip-ups, and then they're jigging for the panfish. But we do have a lot of other opportunities here in New Jersey. We've got lakes that have muskie, lakes with northern pike, lakes with walleye. Interesting that you can catch catfish. I virtually never ever catch a catfish. This little kid here caught 4 in one day last weekend. So channel cats can be caught, and that was all in minnows on the on tip-ups there. Relatively new fish we got going on are landlocked salmon. We have a couple lakes that have them, and guys have been targeting them and doing well. And every once in a while, on a really cold year, you'll get Round Valley to freeze over. And with Round Valley, you can jig lake trout and catch browns and rainbows too. But in 2015, we had a really cold freeze, and guys were doing really well on lake trout out there. That year it froze from shoreline to shoreline about 8-9 inches. It was an incredible year. So if you do have a year like that, take advantage of Round Valley, because it might be another decade before you have that quality ice again. So when it comes to ice fishing, it's more than just fishing. It's so much, get outside, bring the family outside. There's always something to do. If the fish aren't hitting, making snow angels, playing pond hockey, building snowmen, cooking out, having some hot chocolate on the ice. Believe it or not, in the bottom right, that's actually some weird air bubbles that made that smiley face. This is a great time to get out and enjoy the outdoors at a time of year when a lot of people are just cooped up inside. So, end of the year, you start seeing stoneflies crawling up on the ice. That's pretty much tells me that the end is coming near. We're out here in 50 degrees with our shirts rolled up. We still got 10 inches of ice. But when you start seeing that, the end is near. Time to start getting ready for open water fishing. This was 2015, March 24th. It was the latest I've ever fished ice fishing. And that time of year, you can still have really cold weather, but you're losing the ice still because the angle of the sun is much stronger and much longer the days that time of year. So it goes much quicker than you would expect the ice. So doesn't matter if the fish are big or small. you're old or new, I think ice fishing's for everyone.
Thank you, Keith. So we do
How'd I
have a
do?
couple. You did great. We have a couple questions and some clarification. So one person
Okay.
asked, is cracked ice safe to walk on?
The cracked ice, if it's cracked because of the expansion of the ice, that definitely is. If it's cracking underneath you, or you take that spud bar and you hit the ice and it cracks, that's no good. But seeing all the cracks on the ice, that's a good thing. That means the ice is growing. And you're out there, it's below freezing, you just hear that. It sounds like a Star Wars sound. It goes across the ice to crack. That's a good thing when you hear it cracking. That kind of cracking.
Okay, also, can you talk a little bit more about the barometric pressure and why fish care about it? And a couple of people were asking, you know, is it just for ice fishing? And I was saying that no, it's for all fishing. So if you could just discuss that a little bit more.
It affects everything in the wildlife kingdom, even people. Sometimes people get migraines just from the pressure dropping. But it affects fish a little bit more because they don't really have to feed. Their metabolism's so slow, so they don't have to feed every day. They're only going to feed on days they want to feed. You go out in the summertime, you can catch a bluegill any day of the week. That's not too much of an issue. But when it comes to this ice fishing, everything is slowed down. Everything is much slower. So you really need to play that barometer. Most hunters will also play that. They know before a storm, the deer are going to be moving. But unlike fish, that deer still needs to move a little bit to get food every night. But the actual numbers of the barometer, I really don't even look at the numbers here. It's more the trends I'm looking for. It's the little trends, those little dips can really make or break. Like if you were out here for this period of time, I'm not sure, can you see my cursor? If you were out here for this couple hour period of time, you're going to have a good bite there, and it's going to get a little slow, and then you're going to get a good bite, and then you won't have any fish on your fish finder for this whole period of time because the fish will just shut off that much. I'm not sure if anyone has bird feeder. You ever just sit outside or sit from your window watching outside, and for whatever reason at noontime, all of a sudden your feeders are loaded with birds and there's squirrels around, and then an hour later there's like only 1 or 2 birds around. If you looked at the barometer, it was probably falling at the time that the birds were feeding at that point. So you could just use that even as a little bit of a reference also.
Thanks. Any recommendation for types of gloves to use while ice fishing?
Those gloves is the best. I mean, I try to get away with never wearing gloves as long as I can because I really like to be able to feel what's going on. And I like to be able to have my hands free to be able to put the bait on. But when I do wear gloves, I always have ones that are fingerless so I can use my fingers, and then I still have maybe a heavier pair of mittens or just keep my hands in my pocket. This year it's been warm enough. The only time I wore gloves was just going to and from the lake. While I'm carrying cold, wet stuff. Fishing, I do my best to try to fish without gloves. My kids, though, I always make sure they have gloves. You know, it's meant to be a fun experience. So if they're not having fun, don't push it. It's time to pack up and go. And the 2 biggest things that can kill you are wet feet. So having the waterproof boots is probably my biggest go-to thing. And if it's windy, you want something windproof. So as a hunter, if you're a deer hunter, you probably already have everything you need. If you can go sleigh riding, you pretty much have everything you need there. The waterproof boots are the key thing when you have a lot of slush on top, which is what we have now. Like I said, I wouldn't really trust going out at all right now, but later on in the season, if you get a little water on the ice and it's safe ice, you want to have your feet dry.
Great. And one more follow-up question on the barometric pressure. Does the barometer dropping logic hold true in the spring and summer and fall?
It'll hold true any time of year. It's just really magnified when it comes to the ice fishing. In the months, it becomes much more magnified. But you'll notice, I mean, if you're out there fishing open water before a storm comes in, that's usually the best time. As you're sitting there watching, it's like, all right, watching the radar, how many more minutes can I get before it really gets nasty? That's usually the best time, right before the fish know that they need to feed before they're going to be off the feed for a little bit.
Let's see.
I can't say enough. I mean, there might be other weather stations, but if you go to Rutgers, there's ones all across, I'm not sure how many, 30 or 40 maybe across the state. It really has been a game changer since I figured that out. I used to look at these salooner tables and other things like that, and I thought they worked really good. And then I found out, you know, one day I'm like, oh, this is from In-Fisherman. This is from Wisconsin or something. This isn't even relevant to what I have here in Germany. So it was just a random luck that some days it worked, some days it didn't. This, as far, like I said, this is the way I fish. You know, maybe other people got other plans that work better, but for me, two things I would look at is the barometer and this little tiny spring tip. If you're fishing for panfish, that's what you're looking for. Just to show you this, I'm not sure if you guys can see how much that spring is falling right there. That's a 32nd ounce jig that's already pulling it down that far. So you get a fish just barely nibble on it. He's feeling nothing right there, but you're able to see that hit. If you didn't have that there, you'd be getting a lot of hits you never even knew you had.
How do you fish for landlocked salmon? What bait and what depth?
Oh, landlocks. I haven't got into it much. Those fish are usually always suspended. So you're in 40 foot of water, they're usually somewhere maybe 20 foot down. That's something that if you want to be successful, the electronics is something you're really going to need, because you'll be able to drop down and see where your lure is. Guys, I know they're usually jigging spoons with that. Guys are catching them on tip-ups also, fishing with live shiners. But if you're looking for them, you're not going to set up on the bottom. You're going to be somewhere in the middle of the water column there.
Someone thinks you can read the future. Would it be good to go in 3 weeks?
I'm hoping next weekend. I mean, most of the forecast only goes 10 days out. So it's going to get brutally cold end of next week, but it all has to do with how much snow and slush is still out there. You know, maybe I'm just the optimist. I want to get back out there, but I wouldn't be going out there anytime before the end of next week to even look at it. And as for predicting further than 10 days, it's a crapshoot. I mean, weathermen have a hardest time predicting what's going on tomorrow, let alone 3 weeks from now.
Let's see. Can you go over how you would bait a tip with a shiner if you're fishing for bass? What type of hook? How?
Alrighty. When it comes to fishing with the tip ups, like I said, I usually use the medium shiners. I generally use a bait holder hook. And I generally hook them just right behind the dorsal fin. That's pretty much the go-to. You talk to most people, that's the way they're going to do it. They're going to hook it just right behind the dorsal fin. If I'm fishing fatheads for perch, I might I'll fish with them hooked through the lips, but most of the time I'm going to be hooking them right back here, and then they just swim in circles in the hole. Interesting here, a little life hack you might learn. You try and figure out how much bait you have and how much more you need to buy. Snap a picture of it, and now you can actually count them really easy. I think there's 21 in that picture. A little extra knowledge.
Which online forum has the most trusted news on ice conditions?
Oh, there's two that I'm usually looking at. I think it was New Jersey Ice Fishing, another one's New Jersey Ice Fishing Reports, or NJ Ice Fishing Reports. Most of the guys are going to be, you always get some guys that don't want to tell where they're at or spot burn, but most of them are pretty friendly with helping new people, at least telling them what counties, and some of them will tell you what lakes exactly. Other ones always private pond in this corner of the county. But this year has been more important than any year because the ice has been so unpredictable. Like I said, one lake had 6 inches, 5 miles away it was open water. And even the area that had 6 inches might have varied quite a bit. So having these picks on you around your shoulders at all times and using that spud bar as you're walking out are two important things. Now, when it comes to trying to get back out on the ice in another week or two, go to a public place, and if you see people out on the ice, follow their footprints and talk to them from a distance, ask them how much ice they have. But if there's 15 guys on the ice, chances are it's already pretty safe. But I don't want to be the first guy out there with the weather we got out there right now.
Besides a fishing license, are there any other permits needed?
Trout stock waters, where you're targeting trout, you'll need your trout stamp. And you're going to need your trout stamp in another month or two to go trout fishing anyway, so just buy it now.
I live in South Jersey, and so do I. What is the closest lake to me where I can consider for ice fishing?
In South Jersey?
Yeah, we never get ice anymore, it seems.
It used to be Molokai River was always well known for a white perch fishery when it iced over, but that doesn't ice over. Probably ices over about as much as Round Valley does, maybe once a decade or something. Assunpink, certain years that'll freeze up, and that's what I'm interested to see because I don't think they had ice right now. So if they have ice and we got that cold snap, they're going to be building ice quicker than what we have up north where we're dealing with 30 inches of snow on 6 inches of slushy ice. But a lot of it also has to do with, is there ice forming right now and how much snow comes in on Sunday. Some of the most recent reports I was seeing was actually showing pretty chance for some significant snow in the southern half of the state.
Let's see.
A lot of the sports shops too. Some of the sports shops got their own Facebook pages, or just give a call to sports shops. They're going to give you, they're going to give you good reports.
Yeah, they may not tell you if the ice is safe or not, but they will definitely be like, there's ice here, and we've heard it's this thick.
Yeah.
One person commented, so early morning is not necessarily the best time, correct?
Oh,
Barometric
early
pressure is
morning
the best guide.
The first light is just as good as last light. It's just I can't get up that early, man, to drill holes in the dark. My old supervisor used to do that every morning. He used to fish before daylight, and it was always red hot, but it was the same bite you had right in the evening, pretty much right when that sun is just right around the horizon. So if you like getting up early, have at it.
Yeah, I know light does affect it somewhat. Which cell phone app can help locate barometer numbers?
That
Isn't
not an app. It's the Rutgers Weather station. You can find it. Probably just do a Google search for Rutgers Weather or something like that. It'll come up. I could probably, if we're doing some after, if you're sending emails out later, I'm not sure if you're doing after workshop email, I could include the info for that.
Yeah, I can put that in.
As for an actual app that's designed for your phone, I'm not sure if I've seen anything that's as good as that graph. The only thing with that, I view it on my phone, but it freezes up a lot. It gets a little frustrating, and every phone I've ever had, it freezes up on. So I think it's something from Rutgers end, but it's something that I pretty much live by. Yeah, I'm fortunate. I live in an area where I can ice fish 5 minutes from my house. So I could just sit there watching, doing dishes, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, hang on, it's dropping. I'm done doing dishes. I'm running out the house. I got to be on the 10 minutes. If you're driving an hour or two, you don't have that luxury, unfortunately.
So how do you carry all your equipment?
It's ice fishing has so much do-it-yourself kind of facets to it. You'll see everyone building their own different types of tip-ups, and you'll see the exact same thing with sleds. I personally just have a big black jet sled I also use for dragging deer, and I could fit the auger and 2 buckets in there and a couple seats, and I could drag that around no problem whatsoever. But you'll see a lot of guys that have tricked out sleds that have all different attachments and everything. If I'm out there jigging, I'm just carrying an auger in over one shoulder and a bucket in the other. Keep it very minimalistic.
Do you use an underwater camera?
I do not. I know that's like a friend of mine had one about 10 years ago. We used it, and it was like a novelty thing, but it really wasn't helping me catch any more fish. I think they've come a long way since then. I mean, it gives you cool footage, but I'm not convinced that that's going to make you a better fisherman than if you just had a sonar or some other fish finder that's very sensitive.
All right. In the chart, does barometer affect feeding? Does this mean when the barometric pressure goes down, it's getting warmer and the fish are likely to bite? If you could clarify, please. Thank you.
Wow. The pressure, it's before a storm. So when they know that bad weather is coming, they're gonna wanna feed up. It's kind of like blizzard's coming. You go to a grocery store, what do you see? 9,000 people all trying to grab food. At the back end of the blizzard, the grocery stores are empty because everyone's already got their food. That's kind of a little bit of a comparison there. But So before big storms, it's really easy to read that. But certain days where it looks like it's pretty much, you look outside, the cloud cover looks the same. You still have those little patterns where it just goes up and down just a little bit. So those little bumps, that's what, if you don't have that big drop, these little bumps are going to help you there. And when it's climbing like that, it's, you know, if it's a weekend, I'm going to go fishing regardless. I'm just saying your expectations, I think, are going to be much lower if it's climbing like that. That's the time when you're building snowmen and playing hockey, okay? And you might have 2 or 3 flags in a day. Then you go out here when it's dropping and you can have 15 flags in a day. But I'm still going to go out there regardless. But if I had the luxury, this is when I'm going, right there on the drop.
What kind of tip-ups do you use? Do you recommend one brand over another?
I use the ones that people give me. That's the one great thing about New Jersey and ice fishing is people retire and they all move south, and then they all give me their ice fishing stuff. So I have lots of tip-ups that are always given to me. The ones I was showing there were Polar brand, and they're of what I use, I like them the best. There's a lot of different ones on the market now. They have ones that are shaped like a 12-inch disc that fit over top the hole so the hole doesn't freeze up, and then they stack inside a bucket real easy. Something that I'm just starting to see in Jersey that has been going pretty popular in the Midwest for a while, they're called jaw jackers, where you put your tip up in there. You put your fishing rod, your jigging rod, and it bends the jigging rod over, has a trigger there, so when the fish hits, it snaps up and sets the hook. I start to see some guys using them in Jersey now also. Those are a little more pricey. The cheapest tip ups you're looking at are probably 10, 12 bucks a piece. Most of them are probably in the $20 to $25 range, and you could spend, 40 bucks on one or more if you really wanted to.
And we have just a few more questions. Do you find the fish move shallower towards the end of the season? First ice always seems easier, and the season goes on, find it gets tougher. Fishing pressure or fish just move? It
depends upon if you're places like Lake Apacon, fishing pressure definitely has a lot to do with it. But you do have, depending upon the species, that some of them crappie and northern pike, pickerel, they feed. They spawn right at ice out. So some of them will be collecting in certain areas where they're going to be spawning there. So some of them are going to be moving up more to where there's creek mouths coming in. So there is some seasonal movement, but in Jersey, our season is pretty much so short that just get out there and as soon as you can and as much as you can there.
Somebody asked if you've ever eaten a panfish, and I can wager a guess that yes, you have. And what is the minimum ideal size for crappie, perch, and bluegill? Is there much meat on them?
Oh, well, the picture that you saw of those fillets there, that was from like 2 days ago. So yeah, I definitely eat them. Sunfish, I'm probably keeping maybe 6-inch bigger, 6.5-inch bigger. Generally, I'll keep a half a dozen at a time. A half a dozen is good enough for me. I got 2 kids that really enjoy it. So I got a 9-year-old and a 16-year-old and a 43-year-old that all eat it. So usually 6 or 7 fish, that gives me 14 fillets. And the kids like it better when they're nuggets, so I'll cut the fillets in half then to make more nugget shape. And I generally that's flour, egg, breadcrumb, and just fry it in like a 1/4 inch of oil. And it's as good as, it's good. It's some of the best eating freshwater fish you're gonna get. Perch, maybe looking for something 9 inches or bigger. If you're fishing tip-ups, the perch you catch on tip-ups are generally always going to be keeping. They're always going to be probably 10, 11 inches or bigger. Crappie, you got the 8-inch size limit. So anything under 8, you can't keep, but pretty much isn't much meat on either. So. See people a lot of people you'll see keeping pickerel, and there is a knack to flaying them, and the pickerel is really, really good eating. I just wouldn't mess with one if it was under 20 inches because there is a bit of waste. It has a set of Y bones in it. So I end up getting almost like a back strap off it, and then you cut the Y bones off, and then there's another layer of meat below it. But you can make it boneless and you can make it really good. there's a lot of Eastern Europeans that take the pickerel and just boil it whole, or they end up canning it also and just do it so the meat falls off the bones and the bones disintegrate a bit.
How about an ice shelter?
Ice shelters, I haven't got into them, mostly because I like to stay as mobile as possible, and I feel it might tie you down a little bit, and I got enough other stuff to carry. I'm not carrying that. Our winters here aren't overly severe, as opposed to if I was in Minnesota, I'm sure I'd have 6 of them. But I personally don't use them. I know the guys that use them, one of the advantages they have is that they can see down the hole much better, because now they're all in the way it works, you're sitting in the darkness, but there's light coming through the ice on the outside of the shelter, and you can really see down the hole really, really easy. So that's one good advantage of it. It's a good advantage to get out of the wind. You set a heater up, but most of my ice fishing trips are pretty short. Most of my trips, I'm going out after work fishing an hour. So I'm not out there long enough to really necessitate having that shelter. Maybe I'm jealous with the guys that do have shelters though.
Can you ice fish near or on the side of a frozen river?
I had slides about that and I took them off. The Delaware River is one river that guys do ice fish on. This year, you're definitely not. River ice is unpredictable because the current is going to, affect how the ice grows. So you can go from 10 inches to 4 inches in one step if the way the current is. But it was 2015. They had tons and tons of guys were fishing Delaware Water Gap. I mean, it was a zoo out there. 50 guys are out there and catching lots of catfish, actually. But it's something you would definitely need to be very careful with, and I wouldn't go ever by myself. I always have somebody with you at that point. And we're getting hard enough trying to find ice on the pond this year to talk about rivers.
What is the difference or trend from fish biting activity from early ice to late ice?
Something I find when it comes to early ice, when the ice is black, no bubbles, you can see right through it, that in shallow water, you're looking down at the fish and they're staring back up at you, and it's usually not a very good jigging at all. On those early days like that, I've always found better with the tip-ups because you're not standing on top of where the fish are. Other than that, I mean, the fish do move around as the season goes. A lot of times early seems better. If you're on a crowded lake, the fish haven't seen any pressure early season, as opposed to, end of February, early March, where they've had 50 days of people fishing at them. They get a little weary at that point. Like there is some seasonal movements as we go through, but like I said, our seasons are so short in Jersey compared to if you were in Minnesota that it's not as relevant here as it is in other states.
What diameter auger do you recommend?
My gas auger, I use 8 inches. If I was using a hand auger, I'd go for a 6 inch or smaller, just because there's a lot more ice you're moving with an 8 inch than a 6 inch, and it's going to be a lot more exercise trying to drill by hand, or even one of the ones with a cordless drill. I'd stick with 6 inches or smaller.
And can you just repeat what size hook you were using to bait a shiner for the tip up?
For the tip ups, I usually use size 6, 4, or 2 when it comes to, that's just general species fishing. And that's with 10 or 12 pound mono or fluoro leader. If I was going to go for bigger toothy critters, if I was going to try to target pike or muskie, I'd be fishing a bigger hook. Actually, I know a lot of guys fish circle hooks when it comes to those bigger toothy critters, as they're fishing a much bigger bait, and they're going to fish probably a 20 pound or heavier fluorocarbon at that point. But all my tip ups are just rigged up with usually size 6 or 4 hooks is mostly what I have.
Do you ever like the tungsten jigs, or ever catch fish just under the ice in about 15 feet of water, for example?
The tungsten makes you get down back to the fish a lot quicker, so they're definitely good to have. Cost a lot more, but that's definitely something that I try to buy more tungsten than lead nowadays. Now for fish underneath the ice, depends upon the species. One species that does seem to suspend a lot is crappie. And right at dark, a lot of times I'll catch them right underneath the ice. You know, you're jigging with the jig 6 inches below the ice, and you'll just see these big set of jaws come up and your jig disappear. Having the fish finder can also help you, because crappie will suspend any time of day. It seems like just that last light or in the dark, they're really high in the water column, which means you also want to approach the hole a little quieter. You don't want to be running and jumping or have the kids jumping and running if you only have 5 or 6 inches, because that does send some vibrations through and can spook the fish that are directly underneath the ice. If you have a foot of ice, you know, running and jumping, snow machines blowing right by you, that's not going to really affect too much at all.
Great, thank you. So that's all the questions. A few comments. One person recommended the app My Radar is pretty good for storms. And another woman asked about Facebook pages with ice fishing, and I found New Jersey ice fishing reports. So
yes,
you're a member of that, and I'm assuming that must be a good public page.
That it is.
Great. Well, that's all the questions we have. Keith, thank you so much.
New Jersey ice fishing reports, and then there's a different one that's just called New Jersey ice fishing.
Okay. Good. Well, Keith, thank you so much for spending your Friday evening with us. And I appreciate you taking the time. And we got lots of good feedback. And thank you for tonight. And we hopefully will see you again presenting something else, or even better yet, see you on the ice.
Yeah, hopefully give it at least a week. Hopefully we'll have good ice.
Yeah, not in South Jersey, but up north. That's right. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.